something about this problem. Thank you very much. There will be 2 minutes remaining for the Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Etchemins and Lévis' speech when the House resumes debate on this motion. And 5 minutes for questions and comments. Now, statements by members.
The Honourable Member for Bécancour, Nicolet, Sorel. Mr. Speaker, the only thing going up faster than the price of gas in Quebec is the pressure on consumers who have to pay higher prices at retail. There are consequences. 1 Quebecer out of 3 is perhaps reconsidering summer vacation because of the price of gas. This is difficult for families, and especially for far-flung regions who depend on tourism. We have asked the Minister of Innovation to order the Competition Bureau to investigate the apparent cartel, but it has not responded. Even the Government of Quebec asked if the Bureau is going to take measures to ensure that the market for gas remains fair and competitive. No response. With the price of gas as high as this, the Liberals seem to be asleep at the switch.
Mr. Speaker, community is not a location. It is a feeling of acceptance, reliance, and trust. I am thankful for the many individuals who have contributed to my riding's sense of community, but today want to specifically reference the Totera family. Tony Totera is an Italian immigrant who spent his childhood mastering the inner workings of Italian cuisine. In 1972, he and his family brought this taste to the neighborhood of Jane and Finch, and has since then been a trusted provider to our community's great restaurants and hotels. For 40 years, Eddystone Meats has been a place in which customers can trust, but more than that, the Totera family has been a group in which our whole community could trust. Their commitment to the riding is inspiring, with a true heart for helping the community through fundraising and volunteer work. I want to thank them for their 40 years of kind service to my riding and to all of Canada. Thank you and congratulations.
The Honourable Member for Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Mr. Speaker, this Sunday is Father's Day, and I would like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to and honour fathers across Canada. Fatherhood is a challenging, beautiful, and immensely important vocation. Fathers contribute immeasurably to the strength of their families and to the success of our communities. My life has been informed by amazing examples of dedicated fatherhood. My father, Ernie Anderson, continues to be a voice of wisdom and encouragement in my life and likes to remind me that he is my biggest fan. His example of integrity and hard work has been and continues to be a constant inspiration. My husband Milton has been another source of inspiration. His unfailing love and dedication has provided me and our children and grandchildren with constant support and created a space for us all to flourish. I hope Canadians across the country will join me this Sunday in showing their appreciation to the fathers who have helped shape their lives.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton-Canso.
Mr. Speaker, after a bitter and protracted strike between the United Mine Workers of America and the British Empire Steel and Coal Company, harsh actions by the company brought the situation to a head. On this day in 1925, striking coal miners marched to the company's power facility at Waterford Lake, Cape Breton, in an attempt to have the power and water restored to their town after the company had shut it off. In the crowd of 3,000 was William Davis. Upon arrival, they were met by company police. Tensions rose, and the police fired 300 rounds into the crowd, injuring many and killing Bill Davis. In the weeks following, company stores were looted and property vandalized. To quell the riots, 2,000 troops were brought in. This remains the second largest deployment of troops for a domestic conflict in Canadian history after the Northwest Rebellion. Today in mining communities across Nova Scotia, people gather to pay tribute to Bill Davis, whose death stands as a symbol of determination and resilience of Canadian coal miners, and to recognize the sacrifices made by organized labor in building this great country.
The Honourable Member for Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, we'll soon rise for the summer recess. There's much to do before then, but I'd like to take this moment to highlight the exceptional work of certain individuals in my community who've contributed much to the debates in this place on matters of national interest. Over the last 4 months, the Justice and Human Rights Committee has studied the scourge of human trafficking. Let it be clear, human trafficking is a horrible crime, robbing individuals of their basic human rights. I listened to the shocking testimony of survivors who told us that some communities are particularly vulnerable to exploitation, such as Indigenous women and girls and migrant communities. I'd like to thank especially Professor Cecilia Benoit of the University of Victoria and Rachel Phillips and Sadie Forbes of Peers Victoria Resources Centre, who contributed so much to the Justice Committee study. Their thoughtful testimony will help us to build better legislation. As we prepare to go home for the summer, let us recommit to building a better country where no one is left behind.
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre.
The Indian residential school system was a systematic plan to remove Indigenous children from their homes, families, and cultures to facilitate the stated policy of killing the Indian in the child. When Prime Minister Harper apologized here in the House on behalf of all Canadians 10 years ago, it represented an essential step on the path towards healing and reconciliation. Now, on the 10th anniversary of that apology, our government is translating those poignant words into 8 Indigenous languages, Mr. Speaker. We have also followed through on the spirit of that apology with concrete action, both renewing the relationship on a foundation of implementation of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership, with historic investments in the priorities of Indigenous communities. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action now provide all Canadians with a renewed path forward on this shared journey of reconciliation, and we must all commit to working together to heal those past wrongs. Tapwe akikitwam hai hai, Mr. Speaker.
Here, here. The Honourable Member for Langley Aldergrove.
Mr. Speaker, this Sunday is Father's Day. We celebrate fathers and grandfathers by reminding them of their importance in each of our lives. I loved my father and father-in-law. Both were incredible men of God who lived their faith with integrity and commitment. They loved their families and were role models for good. I'm now the role model for my children and grandchildren. I also want to be a man who loves God and his family. Men's health is also important, and I want to thank Dr. Larry Goldenberg and the Canadian Men's Health Foundation. They're working to raise awareness of preventable health problems. One big health problem for men is prostate cancer. I'm a prostate cancer survivor thanks to Answered Prayers and Dr. Larry Goldenberg, one of the best urologists in the world. Men, get your prostates checked every year. Also, check your blood level, the PSA level. Those checkups can save your life. Men, happy Father's Day.
Here, here. Honourable Member for Surrey Centre.
Mr. Speaker, as it's Father's Day this week, it's also Canada's Men's Health Week and the Don't Change Much campaign. As parliamentarians, we work long hours and are constantly traveling back and forth to our constituencies. Therefore, it's very important that we take care of our physical and mental health. Many people look up to us as role models, and for me, it's important that we take care of our health and that we promote a healthy lifestyle so that others do the same. And it doesn't take much. Last week, I had the privilege of hosting the Canadian Men's Health Foundation's Men's Health Caucus Breakfast. I'd like to thank Canadian Men's Health Foundation President Wayne Hartrick for raising awareness on this vital issue. It was inspiring to hear from 2 former CFL players, British Columbians Tommy Europa and Shea Emery, on how important it is to be healthy and active through simple changes such as 30 minutes of daily activity or sleeping for 7 hours. We can improve our life expectancy by up to 70%. I want to commend Dr. Larry Goldenberg, a pioneer of prostate cancer and research, whose commitment to prevent and treat prostate cancer and other diseases from affecting men at an earlier age. So thank you and enjoy a happy Men's.
Honourable Member for Scarborough Rouge Park.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to mark Ramadan, the holy month of fasting and revelation for those of the Muslim faith. In my community, I had the opportunity to join my Muslim brothers and sisters at Jummah, at Iftars, at the Islamic Institute of Toronto, Usman Ghuzi, Masjid Al-Jannah, and Masjid Zakaria. Leading up to Ramadan, I had the pleasure to attend several fundraisers that demonstrated the generosity of the Muslim Canadian community. This year, the Muslim Welfare Centre celebrates 25 years of service to humanity. Some of their key projects include Project Ramadan and the Innovate Food Bank in the Northwest Territories. I want to commend the Muslim Welfare Centre and Islamic Relief and others for their generosity and service to make our place a better world. As we celebrate Eid al-Fitr this week, let us recommit to ensuring that we not only celebrate our diverse Muslim communities in Canada, but also build a country and a world where all of our children can live in peace, security, and harmony. Eid Mubarak.
Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise in the House today to recognize National Blood Donor Week, especially significant this year because it's the 10th anniversary. The National Blood Donor Week Act was enacted by the Parliament of Canada in 2008 under the previous Conservative government. I want to say thank you to the thousands of Canadian blood donors who are the lifeblood of their communities. We celebrate every donor, volunteer, and supporter during National Blood Donor Week. People who donate their blood know they're participating in an incredible act of service that can have such a big impact. This year alone, over 100,000 new donors are required across Canada to help with blood transfusions. All Canadians will either need blood themselves or know someone who will. I encourage all Canadians to take the time to celebrate and to thank a blood donor during National Blood Donor Week. I urge all members and Canadians who are able to give life by donating blood to do so. Remember, it's in you to give.
The Honourable Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, I am proud to be part of the many elected officials for Vaudreuil-Soulanges who, time after time, have helped build our community. Specifically, I would like to highlight today the involvement of Errol Thomas Herbert, member of the British Air Force. During the Second World War, Hal built his life in our historic city of Hudson, where he's well known for his community service and contribution to Manoir Cavagnal.
Work as a member of Parliament under Pierre Trudeau that we have all benefited from. Hal made history on July 9th, 1982, when his bill passed the House of Commons, renaming July 1st Canada Day, which was used and celebrated for the first time on July 1st, 1983. Mr. Speaker, 35 years later, and on behalf of this entire House, I want to thank his wife, Madeleine Hébert, and grandson, Matthew, who joined me in Ottawa today, and posthumously express my thanks to Hal for giving us a day we all celebrate on July 1st, Canada Day. Bonne fête du Canada!
The Honourable Member for Etobicoke Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I join all members in welcoming to Canada a delegation of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, led by its first Vice Speaker, Irina Gerashchenko, and the co-chair of the Ukraine-Canada Parliamentary Friendship Group, Ivan Krulko. The delegation is here to advance the special and strategic relationship between Canada and Ukraine based on the historic bonds that extend over 125 years and rooted in the 1.4 million strong Ukrainian-Canadian community. Building upon the unanimously passed Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement and the Canada-Ukraine Defence Cooperation Arrangement, as well as the military assistance provided through Operation Unifier, jointly we will be discussing Ukraine's security, human and economic development, and its Euro-Atlantic integration. To our Verkhovna Rada friends, Canada's Parliament stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine during this time of Russian military aggressions and occupations. Slava Ukraini и слава Канаді!
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. After the G7, I wish to congratulate, on behalf of citizens of Quebec, the partners of the Integrated Security Group, the RCMP, Sûreté du Québec, and the police service in Quebec, especially Mr. Robert Pigeon. This was a deployment that required a great deal of preparation. After such an event, some people said that the police presence was too strong, but we have to be ready because there's no room for mistake when it comes to the public safety. We can be proud of having been able to keep our city intact and to not have caused any concern for business owners for their property. I would like to give my respect to the police service in Quebec for organizing everything with a great deal of professionalism and attention to detail. A healthy and respectful democracy requires security. A respected democracy is the junction between my freedom and that of my neighbor.
For Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Magandang hapon po sa lahat. Mr. Speaker, do you know that the Filipino heritage community is going to be hitting 1 million people in the next 2 to 3 years, Mr. Speaker? Canada's Filipino heritage community is enriching every aspect of our society, whether it's our culture, economic, every aspect, Mr. Speaker, as we see that community continues to grow and prosper. This week, we are going to be celebrating 120 years of Philippine independence. Every region of our country is going to be in celebration of Filipino heritage in terms of recognizing what the Philippines has done for Canada. Going beyond immigration, Mr. Speaker, we need to look at ways in which we can expand issues such as trade, tourism, and so much more. Doesn't matter where you go in Canada, Winnipeg, Vancouver, Toronto, Edmonton, every region, we are celebrating Filipino heritage, Canada style. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Disnethi, Mississippi, Churchill River.
June 11 marks the anniversary of the Canadian government's apology for the residential school program. Canadians now know more about their colonial history, the abuses suffered by First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people at the hands of their government. And they know more about their Indigenous neighbours and the culture that they celebrate. And though 10 years may seem like a long time, we have an even longer process ahead of us. But I'm inspired by the work of our youth who lead us in the ways the adults never have led us. Like the students in the Treaty 4 Club at Riverview Collegiate in Moose Jaw, who learn from and educate their peers about local First Nations culture. Their work encourages us all to pursue reconciliation through learning and teaching about Indigenous culture. So on our National Day of Healing and Reconciliation, I call on everyone in Canada to follow the example of these students and find ways to turn the promise of reconciliation into action within their communities.
The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
10 years ago today, Prime Minister Harper gave a heartfelt apology to former students and their families for Canada's role in the operation of residential schools. In it, he stated, the Government of Canada built an educational system in which very young children were often forcibly removed from their homes and often taken far from their communities. Many were inadequately clothed, fed, and housed. All were deprived of the care and nurturing of their parents, grandparents, and communities. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis languages and cultural practices were prohibited in these schools. Tragically, some of these children died while attending residential school, and others never returned home. Today, I'm honored to recognize the courage of thousands of survivors who told their stories. Their message is now being passed on in schools and communities across Canada. We all must acknowledge this painful history and walk the reconciliation journey together.
Yeah. The honourable member for Whitby.
Monsieur le Président, le sommet de...
Mr. Speaker, the G7 summit in Charlevoix was a major success, namely with the historic announcement of an investment of $3.8 billion for the education of women and girls who are living in a situation of conflict and in fragile states. Gender equality and the rights of women and girls to education is a priority of this government, and it has been since day one.
This policy is making a real difference for women and girls around the world, and this announcement for Canada and our partners, the United Kingdom, Germany, Japan, the European Union, and the World Bank, is a new and remarkable example. I would like to take this opportunity to also thank the non-governmental associations involved in making this accomplishment a reality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Over the weekend, Canadians witnessed with shock and dismay the U.S. administration hurl insults, verbal attacks, and threats of more tariffs at us. We are all Canadians first, and we will stand with Canadian workers and the families impacted by this escalating trade war. Can the Prime Minister tell Canadians what his plan is to resolve this impasse that we have with our closest ally and trading partner?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my honourable friend for her question, but also thank members of this House and the great number of Canadians that have encouraged our government to continue to stand up for Canadian workers, as we're committed to doing. I think Mr. Speaker, what the weekend told us, Mr. Speaker, is that the idea that there's a national security context to supporting Canadian workers, Mr. Speaker, the idea that there's a national security concern that the United States might have with respect to aluminum and steel industries in Canada and the hardworking women and men who earn their living from those sectors is in fact incorrect, and we will always stand with Canadian workers and thank our colleagues opposite for their support.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, and I know we all know this, that when politicians fight and when leaders argue, it's always the people that suffer. And in this case, these unfair tariffs are hurting Canadian steel and aluminum workers, and additional sectors are being threatened. Now, the government has said that the projected deficit is going to be just over $18 billion next year. Does the projected deficit account for a potential aid package to help mitigate the damage from this dispute?
Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, again, we have said to Canadian steel and aluminum workers that this government, and in fact all Canadians, will have their backs. We've been unequivocal. These tariffs imposed by the United States are unacceptable. The Canadian and American economies are so closely linked that American tariffs will also hurt American workers. Our Prime Minister and our government has met with leaders of the industry to discuss how we can best support these workers. A few months ago, we told workers in their manufacturing plants that their government will have their backs. And, Mr. Speaker, we will not stop working to support these sectors so vital to the economy of the whole country.
Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, there are some things that we could do right now that will create opportunities for Canadians who are impacted by this growing trade dispute. We could immediately ratify the TPP. The carbon tax on Canadian families and businesses could be scrapped, and we could eliminate trade barriers between provinces. These would all have positive effects. Will the Prime Minister begin working with Conservatives on these constructive solutions that will help Canadian families who will be impacted by this trade war?
Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the question from my honourable colleague. As she well knows, it's a top priority, obviously, to ratify the CPTPP, and we're going to move quickly to introduce legislation before the House rise this summer. Mr. Speaker, Canadians know that we have a good agreement that's going to open markets for them, and we welcome, obviously, the Conservative offer to work with us. What we want to do, Mr. Speaker, is to have the best deal for Canadians from coast to coast to coast, so that workers and industry across this country understand that we will always open markets so they can prosper today and in the future.
The Honourable Member for Richmond-Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, under 3 years of Liberal government, the deficit has already reached $71 billion, and that was before a trade war broke out with our biggest economic partner, the U.S. Can the Prime Minister tell us if part of that $18 billion deficit this year will be used to implement measures to help Canadian workers who will be the first affected? Or do we need to wait for billions more to be added? Honourable Minister of Fisheries. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank my honourable colleague for his question. I'd like to thank all members of this House, and in fact all Canadians, who significantly supported our government's efforts to support aluminum and steel workers. We've said from the very beginning that these tariffs imposed by the American government are completely unreasonable. We will continue to support in the most effective and strong manner possible these very important industries. The Honourable Member from Richmond-Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, Workers, businesses, and Canadians will be the first victims of a trade war. The problem is that in the current budget 2018, no money was set aside for complications or crises resulting from NAFTA negotiations. Can the Prime Minister tell us what his plan is to support steel and aluminum workers and whether he will impose compensatory tariffs before July 1st rather than waiting for that date as he had planned?
Okay.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries. Mr. Speaker, we said unequivocally that these tariffs are totally unacceptable. We will be taking a measured approach, but we will be taking measures to support the Canadian economy. The Canadian and American economies are very closely intertwined, and so this American decision will harm American workers as well. We have met with leaders of these industries and workers many times to see how the federal government can support workers. We will continue to support those very important men and women. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Mr. Speaker, the NDP stands in solidarity with the government and the Prime Minister against these provocative words from the American administration.
For Canadian and American workers. While Canadians stand together, President Trump stands alone. American lawmakers and U.S. allies strongly oppose Trump's erratic behavior against their biggest and closest friend. Mr. Speaker, will the government work with all parties in this House to present a unified response to Trump?
Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and I thank my honourable colleague for her question. The answer is simple, yes. We will obviously work with all members of this House to stand up for Canadian workers, to ensure that the women and men in these sectors so important to our economy are protected. We will also work with all members of this House to ensure that the response that our government takes to these unjustified and unreasonable tariffs is measured and proportionate. Mr. Speaker, we've said publicly the national security pretext is absurd and frankly insulting to Canadians, and that's why we're moving forward responsibly with retaliatory tariffs that are equivalent to the ones that the United States have unjustly applied to Canada.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé.
Canadians need to know that we all are united in our response. Mr.
Speaker, there's another issue that is a national priority. As you know, 4,800 litres of oil leaked from the Trans Mountain pipeline just 2 days before the government announced its intention to buy the pipeline. The danger of leaks is real, and there's no way to intervene if there is a big spill. We also learned that 2 First Nations from British Columbia had signed letters of support when, in fact, they were opposed to the project. So, Mr. Speaker, will the government admit today in this House that it failed in its duty to consult First Nations?
Minister of Transport.
Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, getting oil to market is a responsibility of any government, but this needs to be done with, of course, respect for safety and the protection of the environment. The laws concerning pipelines in Canada are strong and are based on the polluter pay principle. Polluters will be held responsible for any problems that are created. We promised Canadians that we would restore trust in our regulatory processes, and that's what we're doing.
The member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
2 days before the Liberals bought a 65-year-old pipeline for $4.5 billion, that pipeline sprang a leak. But don't worry, said Kinder Morgan, it's just 100 litres. Well, it turns out that oil spill was 48 times larger than that. And thank God it didn't happen over water, because these guys still don't know how to clean it up. Hey, Speaker, you ever buy a used car, when you turn it on, it sounds real strange, but the seller cranks up the radio real quick and says, don't worry about it. Well, that's exactly what the Liberals just did, maybe buying the biggest lemon in Canadian history. So what kind of climate leader goes out and buys a 65-year-old leaky pipeline anyways?
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, there are many questions in that question, but I'll answer the first one first. Getting resources to market is a fundamental responsibility of any government, but that must be done with the highest regard for safety and the protection of the environment. The Pipeline Safety Act strengthens Canada's pipeline safety system, enshrining the polluter pay principle into federal law. Companies will be held liable regardless of fault and be required to have the resources up to $1 billion to respond to incidents.
The honourable member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
I guess them being the owners, they've got to put $1 billion aside that they haven't told us about now. You know, whenever Liberals talk about this pipeline, they love to wave around so-called agreements with First Nations, but they won't ever tell us what those agreements actually are. Well, here's what Chief Robert Joseph said. Some of the people these guys say support the pipeline. Quote, at the end of the day, we're not really in favor of any pipeline, but we believe it's going through anyways. They will not listen to anybody. And that's the history of consultation with First Nations people. They consult and they go ahead and do what they're going to do anyways. Enough with the fake consultations, enough with the divide and conquer strategy. When are these Liberals actually going to stand up for the principle of free, prior and informed consent?
Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, this government does not speak on behalf of First Nations.
Why does the honourable member think he can?
And the $1 billion, Mr. Speaker, is not government money, it's polluter pay principle in the Pipeline Safety Act. The honourable member knows that there are communities that have different points of view on pipelines, including governments who all wear the new democratic stripe. This is time to bind people together, Mr. Speaker, not divide them.
Order. The honourable member for Carleton.
The storm clouds have been gathering for a long time. Yet, last year, when this government had an opportunity to save up for a rainy day, it blew all of its good fortune and ran deficits that were twice what they promised during the election, deficits they now say will continue until 2045. Now that those storm clouds have turned into rain, does this government acknowledge that they failed to prepare Canadians for the rainy day?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we're happy to talk about how we've prepared our economy for the future. What we've done is we've made investments in Canadians. We started from day one saying that what we needed to focus on was making sure that we got out from the very difficult employment situation, 7.1% unemployment left to us by the previous Harper government. Now, fast forward a couple of years, we have the lowest unemployment rate we've seen in 40 years. The investments we've made in Canadians have worked. Our growth has improved. We are in a situation, a resilient situation, from which to deal with challenges whether they come from the south, whether they come from our ability to get to international resource markets. Those are
the honourable member for Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, the government lucked out with a very short-term housing boom, doubling of oil prices, and a roaring world economy. Many of these same factors are now in peril. Yet, instead of preparing for these difficult times, they spent the cupboard bare with deficits that were twice and sometimes 3 times as big as they promised during the election. How could they have been so irresponsible?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, let's think about what we've actually done in order to improve our economy. We started by lowering taxes on middle-class Canadians. We moved forward with child benefits for 9 out of 10 families, giving them on average $2,300 more after tax for their family. Mr. Speaker, the kind of things we did led to more disposable income for Canadians so they could put it back in our economy, creating growth and enabling us to be in a position where we can be resilient against challenges. That's where we are today. We're the very fortunate situation where the right policies put us in a better position from which to deal with the challenges we face.
The member for Carleton.
The finance minister is fond of quoting the Fraser Institute with regards to the Kinder Morgan pipeline. He uses that institute's data to justify his position on that issue. That same institute says that 81% of middle-class taxpayers are paying more income tax since his government took office, $800 more. Now, he wants to stack on top of those tax increases a carbon tax. Now, before the House leaves for the summer, will he tell us how much will that carbon tax cost the average Canadian family?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment. Order.
Canadians expect us to be thoughtful about how we grow our economy and how how we actually address the threat of climate change. They know that a thoughtful climate plan needs to include a range of measures, some of them regulatory, such as the phase-out of coal and methane emissions, investments in clean technology, investments in infrastructure, but a thoughtful plan also includes a price on carbon pollution. We will continue to take practical, cost-effective measures to tackle climate change. That is what Canadians expect us to do. The question I have for the Leader of the Opposition is, where is your climate plan?
Fred, I have to remind the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment to direct his comments. We won't get into the question of whether he should ask questions, but his comments to the Chair. The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Well, the question is, when we direct an issue at the Finance Minister, why does he always go hiding? This was a fiscal question, a tax question. He's already raised taxes on 80% of middle-class taxpayers, according to the Fraser Institute. And that's before the carbon tax, which he wants this House to approve in his budget bill. So the question again for the Finance Minister, if he's not still in hiding, is how much will that tax cost the average Canadian family?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, our government was elected on a platform to invest in Canadians, to grow the economy, and to protect the environment. And, Mr. Speaker, our plan is working. Canada's emissions are dropping and our economy is growing. Since we formed government, hardworking Canadians have created 60% more full-time jobs than the Harper Conservatives did over the same period. We are leading all G7 countries in economic growth. Addressing climate change in a substantive way is something that all Canadians expect. It is something we must do for our children. We're doing it in a thoughtful way, and we are growing our economy at the same time.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, you know, I appreciate all members who can speak both official languages, so I'd like to give the Minister of Finance the opportunity to answer in French, and then everyone in Canada will know what good French he speaks. My question is about the Liberal carbon tax. The government knows exactly how much the carbon tax will cost to Canadian families, but the problem is that they have the document, but they're hiding it from Canadians. So why are they just repeating the same talking points? I would remind the Parliamentary Secretary, and, well, I did remind the Parliamentary Secretary, and now I will be reminding other members, that comments must be directed through the Chair, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, our government was elected thanks to a platform that invested in Canadians and that stimulated the economy and protected the environment. Our plan is working, Canada's emissions are going down, and our economy is growing. Since we came to government, Canadians have created many more jobs than under the Harper administration during the same time. We are supporting the economic growth of all G7 countries. Mr. Speaker, our plan is working. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. You're right, Mr. Speaker. You know how to speak French and English, just like the Minister of Finance does. Once again, I'd love to give him the opportunity to speak French before all Canadians. Now, those people were elected by saying that they'll just run a modest deficit and zero deficit by 2019. But the reality is that the deficits are 3 times bigger than they promised, and there's no plan to balance the budget. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister of Finance tell us, in French or in English, how about in French, when the budget will be balanced? The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, we are proud of our approach because our approach is good for Canadian families. We decided to invest in workers, and that is very important for improving our economic growth and also for improving unemployment. We now have the lowest unemployment rate in 40 years. That is good news for our economy, and it's good for Canadian families. Our economy is resilient and will be in the future.
Member for Essex.
Canadians were faced by a barrage of tweets and headlines after President Trump's G7 visit this weekend. His destructive comments about our industry's workers and leaders will not help resolve the barriers we face in NAFTA. New Democrats believe we must stand up to Trump. This government cannot let jobs in steel, aluminum, farming and manufacturing go unprotected. Can the minister tell this House what the government has planned for next steps to resolve this ever-growing trade dispute with our largest trading partner?
Well, Minister of Fisheries.
Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for her question. We certainly share her concern in terms of supporting Canadian workers in the sectors that she identified. We view these American trade actions as unreasonable and unjustified. The Prime Minister has said to President Trump privately everything that he has also said publicly. Mr. Speaker, we look forward to working with all members of this House and, more importantly, all Canadians as well, to support workers in these sectors and show the Americans that these trade actions will, in fact, have a negative impact on American workers as well.
Member for Essex.
In one of those tweets yesterday, the President stated that he is still considering a tariff on the Canadian auto sector. Trump maintains that Canadian autos are a security threat to the U.S., but we all know there is no greater security partner to the U.S. than Canada. 65% of all car parts in Canadian assembled vehicles are made in the U.S., and 120,000 Canadian workers will be the first to pay the price. How is this government preparing for what could be a devastating attack on Canada's auto industry?
Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's important for Canadian auto workers to know that our government stands firmly with them in the face of this seemingly ridiculous American threat. With respect to the national security investigation, let me be extremely clear. The idea that Canada and Canadian cars should pose any kind of security threat to the United States is frankly absurd. We will continue to raise this issue at the highest levels, as the Prime Minister did directly with the President and the Minister did with Secretary Ross as well. We will always support Canadian auto workers, Mr. Speaker, and we look forward to working with all members of the House in that regard.
Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, the people of Ontario have given a clear message that they do not want a carbon tax. Is an attack on middle-class Canadians and a high cost on those who can least afford to pay it. At this time of uncertainty, higher taxes will just make things worse. When will the Prime Minister stop forcing his carbon tax on Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Ministry of Environment.
Speaker, we are very fortunate to have provincial and territorial leaders from coast to coast to coast who are taking serious action on climate change. 4 provinces already priced carbon pollution, and they led the country in growth last year. As the Premier of Manitoba said on Friday, his government is moving ahead with putting a price on pollution because he knows it will help the environment without hurting the economy. Doing our part to address climate change should not be a partisan issue. As Canadians, we all have a responsibility to take action to protect the environment and grow the economy for our children and our grandchildren.
Honourable Member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Mr. Speaker, Ontarians in my riding and across the province voted last week against a Liberal-imposed carbon tax. By removing the Liberal Party's official status, people of Ontario have spoken, sending a clear signal they will not accept this Prime Minister's scheme for higher taxes. We know taxes make life more expensive for families, increasing the cost of home heating, electricity, groceries, gasoline, and much more. So, Speaker, when will the Prime Minister stop forcing this rejected, job-killing tax upon Canadians?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect us to grow our economy and protect the environment for our children and our grandchildren. They know that a thoughtful climate plan includes regulatory measures, significant investments in clean technology and infrastructure, and a price on pollution to incent efficiency and grow the economy. As we saw in the Ontario election, 60% of Ontario voters supported parties that approved carbon pricing. We will continue to take practical, cost-effective measures to tackle climate change and grow a clean economy, because that, Mr. Speaker, is what Canadians expect us to do. And I ask again, Mr. Speaker, through you to the Leader of the Opposition, where is your climate plan?
And I remind the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary again, when you use the word you or you're referring to the Speaker. And some people think you're demanding a plan of some sort from the Speaker, which seems rather unusual. The honourable member for Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Mr. Speaker, last Thursday, Ontarians roundly rejected the Liberals' higher taxes, irresponsible spending of the Liberal government. They rejected years of Liberal mismanagement and scandal. And most of all, they rejected the Liberal carbon tax. Mr. Speaker, last week the voters in the province spoke loudly and clearly. When will this Prime Minister start listening and stop forcing his destructive carbon tax on Canadians?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians know that any thoughtful plan to address climate change and grow a clean growth economy requires a range of measures, including regulatory measures such as limiting methane emissions, including significant investments in growing a clean growth economy through specific investments in clean technology. And they include a price on carbon pollution, something that every economist in this world virtually will endorse. So I would say to the honourable members across the side who seem to think that pricing of carbon pollution was a rejection in the Ontario election, 60% of Ontarians voted for parties that approve and support carbon pricing.
Order. I'm having trouble hearing the answer. Order. We were getting along so well earlier. Order. The honourable member for Barrie-Innisfil.
In the galaxy, Mr. A recent Ipsos poll found that 72% of Ontario residents see a carbon tax as just a tax grab, while 68% see it as purely a symbolic gesture. In other words, they see it for what it is. Right. Last week, in the only poll that matters, the people of Ontario voted against the federal Liberal carbon tax and the rhetoric they used to force it down our throats. The Liberal carbon tax will hurt people who can least afford it. So, will the Prime Minister stop forcing his carbon tax grab on Canadians?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I have said, addressing climate change is a critical imperative of our time. It is something that we deserve, our children deserve, that we focus on, but we need to do it in thoughtful and constructive ways. Our focus on growing a clean growth economy concurrently with addressing climate change with substantive proposals that include the accelerated phase-out of coal, reducing methane emissions, investments in green infrastructure, and putting a price on carbon pollution will enable us to grow a clean growth economy and concurrently meet our international obligations to address climate change.
The honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister was asked by an American journalist about our supply management system. He said, quote, "We were moving towards flexibility in those areas that I thought was very, very promising." Now, last week, the U.S. Agriculture Secretary said the Canadian government offered to allow in more surplus U.S. dairy imports as a part of NAFTA renegotiations. Mr. Speaker, we need a clear answer. Will the Minister of Agriculture stand in this House today, drop the talking points, and stop making concessions in our supply-managed sectors? Yes or no?
Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said many times in this House, our government strongly supports and is fully committed to maintaining the supply management system. The Prime Minister has indicated this clearly. I have. Cabinet Minister Caucus and our negotiators at the NAFTA table have also indicated this very clearly. Mr. Speaker, it's important to note this is the party that fought to implement supply management, and I can assure my honourable colleague this is the government that will defend supply management.
The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, Quebec's dairy farmers are calling for no more concessions on supply management. Dairy has been used as a bargaining chip in trade talks long enough. For the NDP, it's clear there should be no more concessions at the expense of Quebec's farmers. The government must stand firm, not flexible, and fully protect supply management in the NAFTA renegotiations. My question is simple. Will they do it? The Honourable Minister of International Development. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government is firmly committed to protecting supply management. The Prime Minister, the Foreign Affairs Minister, the Agriculture Minister, our whole party believes in supply management, and we are committed to protecting it. The Honourable Member for Sackville, Preston Chesapeake. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that plastic pollution is a growing threat to our oceans and ocean life. All across Canada, the health of our oceans and seas plays a crucial role in the livelihoods of many shoreline communities, including their jobs. In order to support economic prosperity for all, we need to protect our ocean environment. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for the Environment explain to us how Canada intends to play a role in reducing plastics pollution here in Canada? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Sackville-Preston-Chesapeake for his question. Canada is determined to protect our environment and preserve our waterways so that Canadians continue to enjoy our oceans, lakes, and rivers. That's why I'm proud to confirm that Canada, under the Charlevoix Action Plan for Ocean Health, has committed to taking steps to improve our recycling systems in order to clean up our waterways and create good jobs for Canadians. The honourable member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, on Friday, I went with my leader to Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle. We saw that there were some lovely facilities that continue to accommodate more illegals and a transportation system to deliver those illegals to the community of their choosing. Instead of trying to resolve the crisis at the border, we see the government's just trying to manage it long-term with no end in sight. Does the minister think Canada should have a two-tier immigration system? And does he plan to renegotiate the Safe Third Country Agreement? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, of course, our immigration minister is currently in discussion with his American counterpart around the third Safe Country Agreement, but the official opposition finally visited La Colle last week, and we're glad they did so. And I'm glad that he was able to see that what the RCMP and Border Services officers were doing there exhibited a high level of professionalism. So we're very glad that he finally realized that. The honourable member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. I'd like to thank the Transport Minister for answering my question to the other minister. But yes, we saw that the work was being done well, and I'm very proud of those people. But there's a huge gaping hole in our border, and that's what has to change. Can the Immigration Minister tell us whether he is currently renegotiating the Safe Third Country Agreement in order to alleviate that problem? The Honourable Minister of Immigration. We are determined to protect Canadian safety and to protect our immigration system, to keep it well managed, and to keep our international commitments.
The member opposite visited La Colle. He got a chance to see the professionalism of our frontline staff. Maybe he also got a chance to thank them for the great work that they're doing at the port of entry. In addition to that, I hope he explained to them the reason why he and his party chose to cut $390 million from CBSA, further jeopardizing border security operations.
Honourable member for Durham.
Mr. Speaker, today we're debating Iran and its destabilizing influence in the world. The Iranian regime has been involved in the deaths of thousands of people, including Canadian citizens. They've been funding terror groups across the Middle East, including Hamas, which have been active recently in Gaza. And last week, Iran's supreme leader openly called for genocide against the Jewish people. My question is simple, Mr. Speaker. Why does this government seek to warm relations with a regime that can only be described as tyrannical?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear. Our government will always defend human rights and hold Iran to account for its actions. The focus of any discussions we have with the government of Iran will be on ensuring the return of Miriam Mombaini, that she's able to return safely to Canada, and on demanding answers in the death of Professor Saeed Imami. Let me be clear, our government is committed to holding Iran to its account for violations of human and democratic rights. That's why Canada led a resolution at the United Nations in November calling on Iran to comply with its international human rights obligations.
Well, member for Durham.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it sounds like the government will be supporting our motion. This is contrary to their expansion of Canadian presence in Iran. It's contrary to their desire to sell aircraft to Iran. It's contrary to one of their own members hosting delegations from Iran in Canada. Will the minister commit to supporting our motion and ceasing all dealings with the Iranian regime?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. We deeply oppose Iran's support for terrorist organizations, its threats towards Israel, its ballistic missile program, and its support for the murderous Assad regime in Syria. As my colleague just said, the focus of any discussions with the government of Iran will be on ensuring the safe return of Maryam Mambaini and of asking questions in the suspicious death of her husband, Professor Saeed Imami. In November, Canada led a UN resolution calling on Iran to comply with its human rights obligations. We will always hold Iran to account for its actions.
Député de Drummond.
The honourable member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, at the G7, the plastics charter the Prime Minister signed was a disappointment to virtually everyone. The Prime Minister didn't even mention any strategies to reduce plastic use or to ban single-use plastic. Canadians are calling for concrete steps and laws to reduce plastic use and protect our oceans immediately. Will the Prime Minister undertake to work with the provinces, municipalities, and Indigenous communities to establish a national strategy on plastic pollution? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Plastic pollution is a growing issue in Canada and in the world. We can reduce the amount of single-use plastic, and we will, in government, increase recycling rates, and avoid over-packaging. We're working on these issues.
Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, this week Canada signed a so-called ocean plastics charter at the G7 that left Canadians disappointed. Canadians were expecting an action plan with strategies and clear targets, but instead we got a non-binding, vague outline that misses the mark entirely. A&W Canada, the UK, Vancouver and Seattle have all taken leadership to eliminate single-use plastics, but the Liberals still lack the courage it takes to solve the plastics problem here at home. Where is the Prime Minister's commitment to a real, effective and bold national strategy to combat plastic pollution?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Plastic pollution is clearly a growing problem in Canada and around the world. We are looking at the best ways to lead by example, reducing plastic use within government, increasing how much plastic can be recycled or reused, avoiding purchasing products that come in non-recyclable packaging. We recognize the important work being done by municipalities and provinces, businesses, and we are looking to work with them to develop an effective national strategy. It's important that we actually are working with others who have been doing work in this area to ensure that it is an effective and thoughtful national strategy. Prince Edward Island, Montreal, St. John's, Victoria, all have stepped forward, and we will work with them actively.
Honourable member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, thousands of young Canadians have been denied summer jobs because the groups that would have hired them refused to bow to the Prime Minister's imposed values test. Now, one group that did tick the PM's attestation box is the Islamic Humanitarian Service. At the annual Al-Quds Iranian Hate Fest at the Ontario Legislature, Sheikh Shafiz Huda of this same organization called for genocide, the eradication of Israelis. Mr. Speaker, the minister claimed the Liberals' imposed values would protect rates. What does she say today?
Mr. Employment.
Mr. Speaker, our government's very proud of the fact that it's our government that doubled the Canada Summer Jobs Program, ensuring that over 70,000 kids each summer since we've taken office will have that opportunity to get good, quality summer jobs. Now, all organizations that are approved through the Canada Summer Jobs Program must adhere to the terms and conditions of the program. If, in fact, a program does not adhere to those terms and conditions, it's not eligible for the reimbursement of that student's salary. I encourage the member to bring those concerns forward to the department. Thank you.
The honourable member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, yesterday at an illegal and hateful rally in Toronto, Sheikh Shafiq Huda of the Islamic Humanitarian Service used violent hate speech calling for the eradication of Israelis, and a complaint was made to the police. It turns out this organization received funding from the Liberal government through the Summer Jobs Program in the government House Leader's own riding. And yet promoting genocide is clearly criminal, Mr. Speaker. How and why was this approved?
Mr. Speaker, all applicants to the Canada Summer Jobs Program must submit an application that's thoroughly vetted by the department. We ask that the organizations do not use their summer students in a way that would fundamentally work to undermine the rights of Canadians. That's why any organization that receives these monies and uses them in a way that doesn't adhere to the terms and conditions will not receive reimbursement for that summer student. I encourage the member to bring the name forward to the department. Thank you.
Order. The honourable member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, last week a small historic sawmill museum in Nova Scotia said it will close its doors indefinitely because it was denied funding from the Canada Summer Jobs Program. For the past decade, the museum used funds to hire students for daily tours, but this year they refused to sign the Liberals' values test. The Liberals are forcing Canadians to say their values are the Prime Minister's values and imposing fiscal consequences if they don't. How can the Prime Minister justify stopping funding for a non-profit, non-religious museum and killing summer jobs for students in Nova Scotia because of his values test?
Minister of Employment.
Incredibly proud of this government that put young employment and the goals of ensuring that young students get that job experience at the front and foremost of our plan to ensure that young people have that success in the workplace. Now, we've helped hundreds of faith-based groups, not-for-profits, businesses, and public sector groups hire students. We will meet our target of 70,000 students again this year, while the Conservative Party continues to engage in a campaign of misinformation and fear. We're ensuring that 70,000 young people have good jobs this summer that will help them in their future. Thank you.
Honourable member for Brampton North.
Mr. Speaker, last fall, the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls released its interim report. One of the recommendations it included called for the creation of a living legacy through the commemoration for the women and girls and two-spirited people who have lost their lives. Can the Minister of Status of Women please tell this House what actions our government is taking in order to honour the legacy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls?
I thank my colleague for her effective advocacy on behalf of the people of Brampton North. In response to the Commission's interim report, our government announced a commemoration fund worth $10 million over the next 2 years for national, regional, and local Indigenous groups and women's organizations to honour the lives and the legacies of our stolen sisters. Our government remains committed to advancing reconciliation and ending the national tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
Member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
Last week in Uganda, I met many LGBTI refugees. They told me about the incredible discrimination and persecution they faced, even from the UNHCR. Yet this Prime Minister has refused to make the Rainbow Refugee Assistance Program permanent, has significantly reduced the ratio of LGBTI refugees that Canada accepts, and refuses to press the UN for improvement reforms to LGBTI protection in its resettlement programs. Will the Prime Minister make the Rainbow RAP program permanent?
Honourable Minister of Immigration.
The record that this government has had with respect to promoting LGBTQ2 rights both domestically and abroad. We work with the UNHCR and private sponsors to identify the most vulnerable refugees, including members of the LGBTQ2 community. We've funded the Rainbow Refugee Society for 2 years. We've worked very closely with them on identification of those cases. The fact of the matter is our record speaks for itself. The record of the Conservative Party is a party that, when their Minister of Immigration was caught removing LGBTQ2 rights from the Citizenship Guide, it was after an uproar that he put it back in.
Honourable member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie.
Saudi Arabia is now the largest non-U.S. destination for Canadian military exports.
Wow.
But how many exports were sent to the U.S.? Well, we don't know because the Canadian government doesn't track or regulate these exports. Today we are voting on C-47, which does not address this massive loophole. But the expert and 23,000 citizens who recently signed a petition say this must be fixed before Canada accedes to the Arms Trade Treaty. So will the government work with the experts and fix that bill?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I've had the opportunity to get up in this House many times and talk about how proud our government is to see Bill C-47 move through Parliament so Canada can accede to the ATT Treaty. Here's what C-47 will allow Canada to do. It will allow Canada to set an example for countries that don't have effective armed controls. It will enshrine international human rights law and gender-based violence in law as criteria for arms exports. It will control arms brokering. It will allow Canada to do all of that, and the NDP voted against it all as well.
Honourable Member for Malpeque.
Mr. Speaker, young entrepreneurs from across Canada are in Ottawa today to receive mentorship and to learn from business leaders. I'm so pleased that one of those young entrepreneurs is Colton Handerhan from my riding. He's aggressive and he wants to build for the future. Would the Minister of Small Business and Tourism be so kind as to tell the House what the government has in mind to give these young folks the opportunities to build a more prosperous Canada?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, 25 youth from across our country are here in the nation's capital for Youth Can Do It. With the support of the Business Development Bank of Canada and Futurepreneur, we are helping Canada's young entrepreneurs get the mentorship, skills development, as well as the startup financing they need to bring their ideas to market. Budget 2017 provided $14 million to Futurepreneur so they can help even more young entrepreneurs, almost half of whom are women. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague from Malpeque for his continued support of young entrepreneurs, including the shout-out to Colton of his riding, founder of Golden Custom Clothing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Caribou, Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Fisheries is under federal investigation for awarding a lucrative surf clam quota to his Liberal friends and family. His shady conduct has ensured that clam harvesting won't even happen this year because the company he personally selected can't even buy a boat. Meanwhile, the hardworking people of Grand Bank are losing their jobs because this minister just wanted to make a few bucks for his friends. Will the Prime Minister put an end to clam scam once and for all and stand up for the people of Grand Bank?
Order. I ask the Honourable Member for Caribou, Prince George to be cautious with his language. Of course, we know that all members in the House act honourably and we have to be careful in the kind of language we use. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, our government will continue to stand up for the hard-working women and men, not only of Newfoundland and Labrador, who work in the fishery and the fish processing sector. My colleague who represents Grand Bank, Mr. Speaker, has been working on a number of proposals in partnership with Indigenous communities and others that will bring greater prosperity to his constituency and hopefully the people of Grand Bank as well. Mr. Speaker, our decision to include Indigenous partners in the lucrative surf clam fishery was the right decision, and we continue to believe that this offers opportunities for reconciliation.
Now, member for Pierre Boucher, Les Patriotes Verchères. Mr. Speaker, the House has recently received a batch of 46 amendments to its cannabis bill. That's a significant volume, which shows that the government really needs to go back to the drawing board. Among them, there's one that's crucial to Quebec, keeping Ottawa out of the province's right to regulate home growing. Enough of Ottawa's paternalism. To date, the Liberals have been inflexible and dogmatic. Will they finally be reasonable and agree to this much-needed amendment? The Honourable Minister of Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The current approach to cannabis isn't working. It allows criminals to profit and doesn't keep cannabis out of the hands of our children. This government will legalize and regulate strictly cannabis, and we are confident that pleased that the bill was passed by the Senate last week. We will study all the amendments put forward by the Senate and respond in due course. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, a member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister showed up in the back of a pickup to make a campaign-style announcement in Chicoutimi. a nice, clear undertaking to protect supply management in the NAFTA talks. I'd like to remind the government that a unanimous motion to fully defend supply management was passed here in this House on September 26th of last year. Is the government going to listen to the unanimous voice of the House of Commons, or are they going to do like they did with CETA and the TPP and renege on their promises? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, our government is firmly committed to protecting supply management. Our Prime Minister, our Foreign Affairs Minister, the Ag Minister, and the 40-odd members from Quebec all believe in supply management, and we will defend it. We're the party that created this system, and we will protect it. Thank you.
For Nunavut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Indigenous Services. Last week, I asked the Prime Minister a question regarding the recent declaration of crisis by two communities in my riding, a declaration that stems from the lack of mental health services and an increase in suicide attempts. Although I appreciate the answer provided, the funding mentioned is not solely intended for mental health support. Like other existing funding, it fails to address the need. These crises demonstrate that. My question is, will the Minister commit to fund mental health service and support needed by Nunavut youth? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister.
Member from Nunavut for his question. I am happy to reassure him that our budgets both in 2017 and in 2018 had significant investments for both mental wellness and addictions treatment. In fact, this year alone for Nunavut, we have investments of $8.4 million for mental health priorities in that territory. As the member may know, the funding allocations are determined in partnership with organizations like the Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami. We're also happy, of course, to work with the government of Nunavut to make sure that we have appropriate investments, and we will continue to work with all partners and look forward to the opportunity to working with the member himself.
For les citoyens,
for the citizens of all regions of the country, Canadian Armed Forces Day is the opportunity to highlight the sacrifices that soldiers make in our name.
It's my pleasure to draw to the attention of honourable members the presence in the gallery of 6 members of the Canadian Forces who are taking part in Canadian Armed Forces Day today. Colonel Colleen Forestier, Sergeant Mina Gattas, Sergeant Shirley Jardine, Leading Seaman Philip Mercier-Provencher, Corporal Matthew Tate, Ranger Judy Morris. The honourable member for Essex is rising on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In a moment, I'll be seeking the House's consent for a motion. Mr. Speaker, at this difficult moment in our history with our U.S. neighbours, Canadians need to know that all sides of this House stand united as one. Mr. Speaker, there have been talks amongst the parties, and I believe if you seek it, you will find consent for the following motion: that the House recognize the importance of Canada's long-standing, mutually beneficial trading relationship with the United States of America. Stand with Canadian workers and communities that directly or indirectly depend on this trading relationship. Strongly oppose the illegitimate tariffs imposed by the U.S. government against Canadian steel and aluminum workers. Stand in solidarity with the Government of Canada in its decision to impose retaliatory tariffs. Remain united in support of Canadian farmers and supply management, which is integral for dairy, chicken, turkey, and egg farming. Reject disparaging ad hominem statements by U.S. officials which do a disservice to bilateral relations and work against efforts to resolve this trade dispute.